we're doing a deal breakdown today.
Yeah, this is a great example of why you don't get down in the dumps, because last week we lost $27,000 and this week we made it back up. And, there's no way of predicting that that's how it's going to work out. But, this podcast hopefully is going to be a little bit more, like you said, upbeat. And different lessons. Each deal teaches you lessons. Last deal, we talked about taking responsibility and
Welcome back to the Pursuit of Property podcast. Today, it's just my co-host Scott Farrow and I again, and we're hoping for things to be on the brighter side in today's episode. I know last week we exposed the curtain on one of our deals that went south over in South Bend, one of our rentals we finally got rid of. But today we're going to be talking about a win. We had a deal here in Fresno that we wholetailed that just closed at the end of last week, actually the day after we did our Studebaker podcast. So we're doing a deal breakdown today.
yeah, this is a great example of why you don't get down in the dumps, because last week we lost $27,000 and this week we made it back up. And, there's no way of predicting that that's how it's going to work out. But, this podcast hopefully is going to be a little bit more, like you said, upbeat. And different lessons. Each deal teaches you lessons. Last deal, we talked about taking responsibility and follow through. And this deal, it's like sometimes everything falls into place and it works out.
Yeah. So let's start at the very beginning. And Scott, I want you to share first, because I think you actually learned of the deal a little bit before I did. So we'll start there and we'll just kind of go A to Z on how we got this thing from, beginning to close.
Yeah. So one of the benefits of being in sales, like as a realtor, is that like you build a lot of relationships with people who come across, residential real estate. Mm-hmm. So in 2020, a Zillow lead that became a good friend of mine bought a home on Wilson, and the listing agent, her name was Erin. Erin at that project said, hey, like, I'm going to have a property that needs to be flipped coming up here in the next few years. Like, I want to sell it to you. And I had this conversation with her about what I was doing at the time. I had done some deals. We were buying our rentals, like legitimately doing business, not the way that we're doing it now, though. And I had said, great, when that time comes, let me know. I don't want to ever be the person who like bothers you about it. So when the timing's right, give me a call. So then out of the blue, a month and a half ago, Erin calls me and her name pops up and I answer and she's like, hey, it's Erin. That house I have is finally ready to flip. This has been a couple of years. I didn't immediately realize, oh, this is that house she talked about. I was like, okay, great. What house? Turned out the house was her dad's house who had passed away, and she was the seller. So it wasn't a client of hers, it was her. Mm-hmm. And that made a big deal. And so she said, hey, I told you about this house. Like, I'm ready to sell it. You said you like flipping houses. Can you come make me an offer tomorrow? I said, done. Like, it never goes this easy. Well, it does sometimes, but it's rare that you get an easy one where they set the appointment with you for the next day. So I said, can you give me the address? I'll run my comps. I'll go there. I'll make you an offer on the spot. And she goes, yeah, I'm going to call a couple other people just so that I make sure I do my due diligence, but I'm going to make a decision tomorrow. And I said, well, that makes it easy. Who are the other agents or who are the other investors? Because I know most people. She listed them off and she didn't say your name. And so it's funny because I knew the other investor and I was like, well, I know that person. That's great. Why don't I, we'll just go at the same time. We know each other. It's not a big deal. And she said, okay. And we hung up the phone and I said at that point, okay, tomorrow I'm going to start running my comps. So that was kind of what I knew going into it.
Yeah. And I assume I got the call a little bit later because I did not know Erin personally. So I'm getting a call from this random number as, realtors usually do. And she goes, hey, this is Erin with so-and-so. And I was like, hey, Erin, what's going on? Because I didn't at the time have any, on market escrows going on. So just a random call from an agent. And she goes, hey, I actually got your number from another agent in my office who says you buy shitty houses. And I go, yes, I do. What can I help you with? And she kind of provides me with, all the details. And she said, as an FYI, I've got two other investors coming tomorrow at 1:00. If you want to come a little bit before, I can do noon if you'd rather do noon. And I went, okay, great. Noon sounds good. And then I kind of pulled the similar line you just said was, hey, I'm just curious if you're not comfortable with sharing, you don't have to, but I'm an investor. I've been doing this for a little while. I know 99% of the people who are buying homes in town. Who am I going up against? Who's coming out at 1:00? And, she names the other investor, and then she goes, oh, and then this other guy named Scott Farrow. And I go, I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, shit. Little does she know, we share an office. We own 9 rental properties together and like all this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, funny story. And I list all those things to her. And I'm like, honestly, if you're okay with it, I'll just show up the same time as Scott. We share an office, it's going to be no big deal. And she's like, okay, great.
Right. And to us, it was like we could have kept it secret or whatever, but we're always about transparency. And so it was like, if her goal is to get a couple offers, then let's make sure that we give her options and just tell her like, hey, just count us as one person. If you want to go get a third person, go do that. But you and I are going to work together. Yeah. That was a pretty easy conversation too. Yeah. We looked at it and we just said, hey, we're going to run our numbers the same. Our offer is going to be the same. We might as well partner on it and then do that deal. Yeah. And so we showed up to the property and we actually took Martin with us.
Yeah,
so
we did.
We already had an appointment with another investor to come to the office and talk through deals, go get lunch. Mm-hmm. And so we told Martin, let's go to this walkthrough. And Martin went with us and we walked through the property. You spent the majority of the time actually looking at the house and documenting the condition of the home.
Yep.
I spent a majority of the time talking to Aaron because frankly, I had a prior relationship with Aaron as, a listing agent, buyer agent. Yeah. And we had a conversation that was essentially like, hey, why don't you list it? Why don't you sell it to us on terms? Why are you not keeping it as a rental? Because she kept feeling like it was in the worst shape ever. And we were trying to explain to her that this is all normal, right?
Definitely nowhere near the worst house we had seen in the past.
So we spent that time talking to her. And this is where we really want to take the moment to like explain that transparency is always key. When we walked in that house, we said, Aaron, this isn't like the worst house ever. It needs work. It definitely can sell for cash for a reasonable price. You're going to take a slight discount selling it to us, but you could list this on the open market and probably make more. And she said, I don't want to do it. And that was kind of when we said, okay, well, we're going to buy it from you then. Yeah. So we went back from the house and we said, when are you making a decision? She said, whatever, tomorrow by 6 p.m. We went back to the office with Martin and we ran our numbers and we all three came to about the same number. It was 115. Mm-hmm. And so we said to ourselves, that seems a little low based on the fact that we're looking at the market, we're competing. We have to be a little bit less aggressive or less conservative if we want to get the deal done. So we kind of fiddled with the numbers back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And we came to the conclusion that based on what we knew, we were estimating our bids, right? But based on what we knew for a fact, we could probably pay 130 and be okay. Mm-hmm. We would be limiting our wiggle room if things went wrong, though, yeah. Right? And that's where I think you and I disagreed a little bit on how high we were willing to go. I think from the start, we both were at 115 and we slowly worked our way up, but it was not like, oh yeah, we can just pay 130 all day. Yeah. Right.
Especially when, and this is what makes investing and making offers so difficult, because you don't want to be too conservative and have your price be so low that you can't be competitive, but you also don't want to be too aggressive, make an offer that's flying off the moon, where you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot by losing money or breaking even on a deal, right? So it's always a constant, effort to try and find that middle ground where you can be a little bit aggressive, but still conservative enough that you're in a good spot if something goes wrong.
Right. No, and overall, it's like there's always a healthy balance. Like if you want to do consistent deals, you have to take on some risk, right?
Yes. Yeah.
There are deals that come where it's like almost no risk, but they're not frequent and they're kind of unique. So you have to be comfortable knowing, okay, I'm making a calculated gamble that I've done as much due diligence as I needed to do to make this offer.
Yeah. Okay. And so we kind of, the three of us, the two of us and Martinez, were kind of penciling things out. We started at 115, but we were like, okay, realistically, to try and be a little bit competitive, we're really maxed out at our comfort level at 130. Right. And then I can't remember if
I handle a lot of the conversations.
Yeah.
So I'll break it down.
Yeah.
My memory says that we made the offer at 130 verbally. Then we got a call back from Aaron saying, hey, look, somebody else is higher than that. I'm not going to tell you quite where they're at. I'm just going to do a final and best later today.
That's right.
I need you to make an offer that you're comfortable with, right?
Yeah.
And we had said, okay, we sat down, we talked, and we said, well, 130 is really where we were max comfortability, but we have to get uncomfortable. And where does that put us? So we said, they're probably going to be a little higher. She'd mentioned that the higher offer did have a commission structure. Mm-hmm. So we knew that we at least aren't charging a commission. So we didn't have to be perfectly matched. And we said, likely a person who doesn't do this all the time is going to be probably closer to 140, right? Because they're probably thinking that a rehab's going to be cheaper, or they're not expecting closing costs or whatever. And we said to ourselves, if we bought it at 140, are we still going to make money, or do we have a chance of losing money? I think that's where we kind of got to, was we were like, hey, we want to do this deal, and we got to just make sure we're not going to lose money. Mm-hmm. And we had a conversation about if we were going to do 139 or 140. And we ended up just saying, like, do the damn 140 and be done with it. And so she had said, submit your offer by 6 o'clock. At 5:30, our offer went across for 140. Mm-hmm. And then at 8 o'clock that night, she gave me a call and was like, hey, I ended up getting 2 other offers that came in unexpectedly, but I'm taking your offer. Are you going to screw me over on this? And we were like, no, we're solid. We're ready to go. Give us 10 days and we'll close this deal. And boom, we were off to the races.
And we knew, it's important context too, when we were doing this deal breakdown, we knew from the start that our 2 primary exit strategies we were looking at, we really wanted to flip it. First and foremost, we were looking at that. But as an investor, having multiple other exit strategies, in our tool belt, we were also looking at wholetailing, which for people, again, if you're a new listener or still unfamiliar with the term wholetail, is you buy and close on the property. You do a quick clean out. You may do, a thing here or there. You're not doing any major rehabs. And then you're turning around and listing it on the market.
Right. And the key there was that we had that conversation. We were like, well, we told her to just list it and that she could make more. Like, if we bought it at 140 and listed it, like, we're the agent listing it. Could we make money there, even if we didn't flip it? And we said to ourselves that we felt very confident that we could list it on the market and get out of the deal if we felt we couldn't flip it and make a profit.
Yeah. And our strategy, as we closed, right? So we close on it. We use private money from a private money lender. Our purchase price was 140. We borrowed a little bit over. We borrowed 150 so that we would truly be upfront, no money out of pocket on our wholetail, right? And we were looking at it as, okay, if we do end up flipping this, we can always just borrow more money at a later date to fund the rehab. But
we also had to close the deal very quickly, and without bids
quickly
from the contractors, we didn't want to ask for a certain amount of money and then go back and ask for more.
Yeah.
So, we borrowed that 150 to get the deal closed because she wanted timeliness. We had a conversation with the private money lender that, like, look, this first 150 is the purchase plus closing costs, plus we're going to do some initial clean out. And then, people couldn't get started until early April. So we had like a 2-week delay from when we got escrow closed to when we had people out on the property.
Yeah. And I think we closed, when we bought it, we closed escrow in 10, 11 days. Like we
opened
like
escrow on a Friday. We closed not that following Monday, but the Monday after.
Yeah. So fairly quickly.
During that whole escrow period, we spent the entire time just taking contractors through to get quotes, right? So we wanted to salvage the hardwood. So we got a hardwood guy. We wanted to get the roof done. So we sent a roof guy. We had a window guy. We had our GC come out and quote the majority of the work. We had a landscaper come out and quote the yard, which turned out there was concrete in the backyard that we didn't know about, right?
Yeah.
we had
Cleaners.
a cleaner come out and clean the inside of the home, just so that at the very start, our contractors had a clean enough place to work. But also, if we did want to wholesale it and we said, hey, our budget got way out of hand, we need to wholesale it, that would be done, right? But there was also a meetup during that week. So from the Friday that we opened escrow to the Monday, 2 Mondays later that we closed, there was a meetup that I went to. And I didn't even want to go, but I pushed myself to go. And after the whole presentation had happened, somebody had approached me and was like, hey, I'm looking to buy a deal. And I said, well, I'm buying a flip that I want to flip, but if you made me the right offer, I'm not going to turn it down. And that ended up being the person who bought the home, because we didn't go market the property. It's not like we like posted it on MLS or in a group or blasted an email. There was like 2 or 3 people who had reached out to us organically, who had seen the Instagram stories or at the meetup, who said, I want to make offers on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, from the start, like you were talking about a little bit, we had the cleaners go through. They did a deep clean of the house, right? We then had your landscaper, who, funny enough, does the landscaping for your personal home, get a quote. And he did complete landscaping front to back, everything, and made the home just with a little bit of landscaping look so much better. And so we're at this point where, like you said, you met this guy at your meetup. We had 2 or 3 other people reach out organically.
Let me clarify. The guy at the meetup was somebody I've known for a few years. Yeah. Like tangentially, we didn't know each other, but we've known each other for a few years.
Yeah. So we've got the house now in a position. It's been landscaped. It's been cleaned out. It's prime and ready to go to test the market for us to turn around and list it, right? And so we're looking at this and we go, okay, before we list it, let's have these 2 or 3 people go out. Let's, see where they come in at and where they're comfortable with. And then you and I can evaluate if it's an offer that we want to entertain and end up taking. 1 or 2 of the offers came in really, really low. And we were like, no, at this point, the profit would be so slim. Yeah. We're just going to move forward and list it and or flip it. But you want to talk a little bit about this buyer, because you explained it really, really well. That we never want to force anybody in a corner to do a deal, right? Yeah. But we had this guy from the meetup come through.
Yeah. So this guy came by. Essentially, he said, I want to go walk it and make an offer. And he walks it and he texts me 185. Again, we bought this thing a week earlier for 140, and we had put $30,000 into cleaning it up. A little over 3,000. Mm-hmm. And I was like, if I were to sell this after a flip, I would hope to make 40, 45 was kind of the number we were looking at. And this gets me 30 something. And I was like, I don't know. That seems like a good deal for 0 risk. And so we pondered it for a bit. We reached out to him and said, hey, let's open contract at $5,000 earnest money, hard earnest money, meaning you can't get it back. Mm-hmm. And let's just do this then. We said, hey, we're willing to give you this deal as a relationship thing. We were going to try to sell it for more, but we feel like that's a reasonable price. We want to make sure that you make a profit. Let's do it. And he kind of showed some concern. He was like, well, I'm not comfortable putting in $5,000 off of a single walkthrough. I want to get a contractor through to double check it. And I said, you know what? Let's just have you not open escrow. The contractors are still we're still waiting on contractors to get back to us. Why don't you just do a home inspection and then call us? And if you want to buy it, buy it. And if you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. And so we set it up. That was on a Thursday. That following Saturday had a home inspector out, and we were coincidentally on a ride with Martin again.
Yeah.
And we were riding, training for the Ironman, and he called us right when we got to our halfway point where we were stopped and was like, hey, I'm good for 185. And I guess he had found a few extra things, but he had felt comfortable at that point. And you and I were like, hell yeah, this is perfect. This guy knows exactly what he's buying. He's going to pay us this price still. We feel good that we didn't try to pressure anybody to do anything they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And we looked at the numbers and we had said, you know what, we're happy with the profit with 0 risk. So we ended up signing that day, and we closed not the following Friday, but the Friday after that.
Yeah,
so
another quick
another 2 weeks, and boom.
Dude.
So let's break down the numbers.
Yeah. So And I don't know if you can see it in the shot. You might not be able to.
Can you see it or no?
No. Okay, cool. We've got our whiteboard just looking disgusting with all these numbers back here. But what do we want to start with? We want to do this one over here. That's probably the most simple.
Let's do the one over there.
The one over there?
So the way that we run numbers, we've done a podcast on this before, but we're going to, real quick, before we actually go through the actual numbers.
Yeah.
When we run our numbers, we start with the end final price in mind. What is the fixed up sale value? And we work backwards from there to discover what your profit was. So in this case, we sold it for $185, so that's where we'll start.
Yeah. Yeah, so we sold it for $185. We then have to account for the initial private money loan that we borrowed, right? We borrowed $150,000, but we also owed interest on that loan. It was an interest-only loan, and we ended up paying our lender really great terms, which we were happy with and they were pumped with. We ended up agreeing that if we sold it right away, because we were planning on flipping it, so we wrote the mortgage with flipping terms, but that if we ended up selling it right away, they would have 1 point origination fee. So that's 1% of the loan amount. So $1,500 plus 12% monthly return for guaranteed 3 months. 3 months. That's right.
So that was $6,000. So we had already paid $1,500 of that in the original closing of the first escrow when we bought the home. That's the origination point. And we had prorated some of the interest for that month.
Yeah.
So we owed a remainder of $41.7120. So we owed the private lender we borrowed from $154,171.20.
Yep. Yeah. So quick turnaround. I mean, from A to Z, from when we closed on it, when we first bought it, to when we sold it,
It was 18 days.
18 days. So super stoked for our private money lender.
He made 18 a 48% return.
Yeah. Freaking insane, and definition of a win-win there.
He offered to lower the interest rate. He said, I don't feel right taking this much money for this short a period of time. And this is, again, going back to last week. When you have a deal go bad, you pay your lender back in full. When you have a deal go good, they want to give you a break because they know that you always pay. But don't take that break. Always pay in full. Stay to your agreement and you'll always get the overfunding like what we're getting here.
Yeah.
That lender didn't ask twice when we asked for $10,000 more than the purchase price.
Yeah. And it's all about building relationships. It's the same thing you did with the person who ended up buying the property, right? It's making sure, hey, building the relationship. We don't usually in these, wholesale type deals
Never.
Yeah. You letting people go and do a home inspection, but it's all about building the relationship. Go make sure you're comfortable with this deal. Let's build this relationship for future deals and keep doing business together. So really important lessons in there. So we got the 185, we subtract the 154 and some change, and we ended up getting a wire at closing.
Do you hear crackling?
No. Do you?
It might be my headphones. Sorry.
So we've got 185 that we sell it for. We subtract the 154 and some change. That's got to go back to our private money lender.
There was some property taxes that we had to pay for.
Yeah, a couple $100 in property taxes. And we ended up getting a closing wire to our bank accounts of $31,004.90.
So that is what most people would say, hey, that's your profit.
Yeah.
But in this deal, we were laughing because we we were trying to figure it out for like 20 minutes because we kept getting different numbers than what our bank account said we made.
Yeah.
But at the close of the first escrow, when we borrowed $150,000, we didn't have $10,000 in closing costs. So when we bought the house, we got a check for $5,400, somewhere in there.
Yep. And
we used that $5,400 to pay for the cleanup and the yard maintenance on the property.
Yep.
So we still had a balance of $2,318.54 from that initial check. Yeah. So you have to add those two numbers up, the $31,000 and change and the $2,300 and change. Mm-hmm. That makes $33,323.44 at that point that we've gotten from escrow after paying off all debts, including escrow fees, taxes, insurance, everything. That leaves pretty much the only thing to deduct was that we had to put $1,500 in at the start of escrow on the first purchase. Yeah. That we didn't account for.
Yeah.
That leaves our total profit at the end of the day. The amount of money that we made was $31,823.44. That is an amazing return for 18 days.
Fantastic return. And you think you divide that by 2 on a JV deal, just for anybody curious on the math, it is $15,911.72 a piece in 18 days.
So we're now going to break that down. The reason why that number is the way it is for a couple reasons. One, we had a relationship with that person. So we got access to a deal. This wasn't a cold call deal. This wasn't a mailing lead. This wasn't a probate lead. This was somebody who called us because she said, hey, I liked working with you in the past. Or in your case, somebody referred you because they liked working with you in the past. And we want to do a deal together because I want easy sales. Mm-hmm. That's the first part. We had told her in that conversation she could sell it for more. She understood, hey, I'm taking a discount to be done. 2, we ran our numbers 8 or 9 different ways to make sure that we were safe. We didn't overpay when it was really easy to just jump right on in, because this home, although it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, had kind of a unique setup where it was truly a 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a 1-bedroom, 1-bath add-on. Yeah. So some people may have assumed to run it like a normal 3-bedroom, 2-bath and account for it that way when you couldn't really do that. Yeah. So that was another reason why we were able to make money, is because we were smart about what we were doing. Yeah, I think it all came down to, going back to when we were trying to figure out what's the best number we could pay, because we had a deadline. It was highest and best, right? You had done your very best on the appointment and, throughout, the day or two after, to really continue trying building rapport with the seller, right? And at the end of the day, we still had a highest and best that was due in the evening. It was just a number. And it was just a number. The seller, Aaron, was going to take the highest offer that came in. And so I think it all goes back to making sure you are being conservative but aggressive enough. And those are 2 complete polar opposite words, but it's knowing your numbers and knowing your risk and your comfort level. Yep. And we wanted to get the deal done at the end of the day. We wanted to close this deal, and we wanted to have this project under our belt. And there's still more to it. I mean, we had access to money from prior relationships that were willing to fund without thinking twice and close in 10 days. Mm-hmm. Not everybody has that, but we've done a really good job of developing relationships with that money and with people with money, so that when we call and we say, these are the numbers, this is what we're asking for, they feel confident in giving us that cash. And I mean, we document everything and everything's in writing, but not everybody can close a deal in 10 days like that. If you're going to a hard money lender, very rarely can you do it that quickly. And then lastly was we networked. Like, had I not gone to that meetup multiple times over the last few years, like tons and tons of times, talked to people, demonstrated that I actually knew what I was doing and helping people, had we not taken into account that this buyer is not ready to pull the trigger right away and that he needed a little bit extra confidence, like, this would not have worked out. And so being both developing long-term relationships with other investors and being patient with them, that was the other part that really got this deal done for the price that we wanted. Yeah. And I think looking back, we've talked about it a little bit. I think, we discussed, hey, what if we didn't end up taking that 185 and we ended up listing it? I think we both agreed we may have been able to make a little bit more if we turned around and listed it on the market. But one, that time frame is up in the air and a question mark, right? Because nothing's guaranteed with a listing, putting it up on the market, right? And 2, even though potentially we net a little bit less, 185 was still a fantastic offer. It built and continued to build on this relationship with the end buyer who's doing this project. And, we portray ourselves as investors and guys that people want to do deals with. I think at the end of the day, building that relationship, it's worth more than the money turning around and listing it, right? And so I think that's another important lesson for people to take. It's not always about making the most amount of money. A lot of relationships are worth more than money. Yeah. The other part too is, like, we both wanted to flip this house because it's like,
It would have been a cool project.
Well, it's a fun
dude.
project. And so, I mean, we both had moments where we were like, are we sure we want to let this go for this? Like, yeah, we're making a good price, but it's fun to flip stuff. And like, it's good for interactions and social media and all that. And, you know, you have to not let your emotions take over. Like, you have to be willing to say no and just go with what the numbers say we need to do. And so in this case, like, the difference was pretty marginal from what we thought was a realistic worst case scenario. And we said, you know what, if we list this house, we get less than we want. We get, you know, repairs go over budget, whatever. Like, just to make a few $1,000s more sounds like a pretty bad idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we kind of transition into, you know, wrapping up this deal, I want to share also, you know, a couple important lessons we learned. We actually grabbed coffee with Aaron yesterday from this day that we're recording the podcast. And we wanted to collect feedback because, you know, Scott had made a good point that, you know, nobody loves being cold called. So it doesn't make sense if you are out there as an agent who is also an investor, or an investor in general, calling up agents and say, hey, bring me your deals, cold calling all these agents out of the blue. It's very, you know, unorganic. People don't like it, and they're not going to want to send you deals if you're coming across like that, right? So our goal was, one, just catching up with Erin and letting her know, hey, here's how the deal went. You know, thank you so much again for trusting us.
And she knew how much money we made. She knew who we sold it to, how much we sold it for. Like, the thing about being honest with people at that upfront appointment where we said list it for more is that we felt comfortable saying, hey, this is what we ended up doing. Like, she wanted to see what we did with the flip. And so if in 2 weeks she calls us and says, how's the flip going? It's not like you're going to lie to them and say, oh, it's going great, like X, Y, or Z. It's like, well, we sold it.
Yeah, exactly. And another big takeaway we wanted to ask her was, hey, what made you think of Scott 2 years later after doing one on market, 3 years later, one on market transaction, but two, what did we do really well or what didn't we do well during the escrow and the process of when we purchased your home? And, you know, she gave us really, really good feedback. You know, the biggest piece, I think, being relationships are key, right? Just relationships and organic networking is key, right? Word of mouth, right? Your reputation. And I think if you are an agent out there who, you know, wants to connect with other agents and make yourself known about, you know, you're a person that can buy crappy houses for cash, or even if you're an investor looking to connect with more agents, your reputation is key, and it's got to be organic. It's got to be organic networking. You know, now that we have this deal under our belt with Erin and all the great feedback we got from Erin, we know Erin, when she comes across a deal like that again, or she hears of another agent come across this deal, that word of mouth, that is the best thing that we can get for us. Way more than us cold calling agents or doing X, Y, and Z. So just making sure that the way you are doing business is, you know, you're doing business the best that you can and making sure you're building a great reputation for yourself.
Put in the work to have an ROI on your stuff. You know, like, don't go and screw people over because you won't last very long. But if you develop, like with the buyer, giving him the opportunity to do stuff, like you're developing a long-term relationship where he knows that our intention is not to screw him over. No. Like, we want him to win too, because at the end of the day, like, he has to have a price that makes sense for him. And so, you know, you have to leave yourself good return on investments, not having to pick up the pieces for breaking relationships every step of the way. Yeah. And I know, well, as we wrap this up, I know hopefully what's really cool is you've got a deal in the pipeline with another agent that hopefully might be coming up soon. And, you know, if that ends up closing, we'd love to have that agent on and do another deal breakdown. But, you know, always you and I are here available to help agents, investors, whatever you guys need, you know, deal breakdown, deal analysis. We're always an open book and here to help. But that wraps up kind of our deal analysis on our terrace address. Live and learn, guys. 1 week you might lose 27 grand, and the next week you might make money.
Yeah. And it's funny, 31 to 27, we penciled it. It's so funny how that works out. Almost penciled out to the exact penny, but we were close. It was good.
Good shit, man. We'll see you next week, guys. And next week we are bringing on an agent who you're going to really like, who left a corporate world position and is crushing in real estate now.
Boom.